Hello, hello. Welcome back to the podcast. It's your girl, Kamie Crawford. And today we have someone who, as soon as I saw you on TikTok, I was like, I have to have her on this show immediately. We need to talk. Antonia Hylton, correspondent at NBC News and MSNBC, host of the Grapevine and Southlake podcast, and author of the New York Times bestseller, Madness, Race and Insanity in a Jim Crow Asylum. Antonia, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. And thank you for all that very nice intro.
Thank you, girl.
Pumping me up.
I'm telling you, I have to give you the exact scenario. I was on the treadmill in Alabama for a catfish episode.
Oh.
And I was in Montgomery, Alabama, actually. I think Montgomery, Alabama, summoned your book to me. And I'm on the treadmill and I was scrolling through TikTok and a video that you had posted about your book came up and I was like, this is absolutely insane, no pun intended, but also I could not believe that this happened in my home state and I had no idea that this was even occurring, but we're going to get there. Where are you from?
So I was born in Chicago.
Okay.
And then I was raised right outside Boston in this tiny town called Lincoln. And my family was like the only Black family there.
Wow.
And I mean that not as a joke.
Yeah.
For a while, we were the only Black family with kids in the school system there.
Wow.
And its claim to fame is that it's where Paul Revere went riding. You know, the British are coming. The British are coming.
Yeah.
So that gives you the vibe, the aesthetic.
Very, very patriotic.
Very patriotic. You know, a lot of Revolutionary War reenactors. Not a whole lot of people who look like us.
Yeah.
So I was one of 7 kids. We're all super tight knit to this day. I think in part because we grew up in that environment.
Yeah.
We were kind of like, dang, we got to stick together.
Yeah. What was that like?
So I have no regrets about it, but I wouldn't raise my own kids in that town.
Yeah. Understandable.
Amazing public schools because you have access to these resources. I really got to know a lot about American history because I was living around people whose families came over on the Mayflower and who felt like they really owned the heritage of this country.
Oh my God.
Roll. I know, huge eye roll. But at the same time, in a way, I'm actually glad that I was exposed to that because when I got to college and I immediately was like, all the Black people, where are you? Where are my friends?
Yeah.
When I got to college and I started befriending girls from Atlanta and places like that where they had gone to school with and always had friends who just looked like them.
Right.
You know, I saw them struggle and sometimes feel shock at some of the things that they saw happen or that they heard kids say in school because they just hadn't been exposed to some of what that is like. And for me, I was like, oh, I had an education before I ever got here.
Yeah.
So I'm ready for this. And so I don't have any regrets about it, but I do wish that I'd had more diversity, you know, a slightly more vibrant place.
Yeah. Yeah. I grew up in Potomac, Maryland, and it's a mainly Jewish community for sure. But I grew up with people that were Persian, that were Indian, that, you know, were doctors, lawyers, families. It's a very affluent town. But my sophomore year of high school, my family moved to Scarsdale, New York. Also predominantly Jewish, but I think I was one of 5 Black students in the entire school at the time. And I remember being asked about joining the Black Student Alliance. And my immediate response was, what are we alliancing? There's none of us. We don't have a chance in this fucking place. What are we alliancing against or about or to get? How? There's not even that many of us. And that was the first time in my life that I ever got called the N-word, was when I was 15 at that school. And the first time that I ever realized how the rest of the world did not look like my household, did not look like, you know, my old school or my old town. It wasn't filled with a bunch of different looking people who were all successful. And I mean, racism, just racism full out. I never really had experienced that growing up. My family's from Jamaica. My mom's side of the family is all from Jamaica. My dad's side of the family's from Detroit. And
wait, we're in Detroit. My dad's family's from Detroit.
I literally could not tell you.
Okay.
I could not.
Do you still have any people there?
We still have family there, yes.
Okay.
But I don't know exactly where. I know he went to Cass Tech.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Wait, okay.
Did your dad
We're
go
gonna
to
have
Cass?
to have a whole conversation after the fact about
Wait. Oh my God. What if they're
My dad went to Cass Tech. My dad's a very Detroit, you know, till the day he dies, even though he's lived in Massachusetts now for 30 years, he doesn't identify with being from Massachusetts. He's still Detroit.
what if they're like friends?
If they might know
They
each
might
other.
know each other.
Yeah, no,
That's
I
crazy.
mean,
My dad played football. He was like, that
oh my
guy.
God. Yeah, my
That's
dad was a
crazy.
gymnast.
And then my dad
he's a
went to
twin.
Boston College.
Okay. We might need to, if our dads aren't friends,
No,
we should set them up
they
on like a
should be.
friendship date.
Yes, 1000%. We should set them up. That's hilarious. Wow. Okay. Connections. See, I knew I had to have
Meant
you
to
here.
be.
I knew you had to come. But yeah, I felt like, the part of Detroit he grew up in was very Black. And like, I just had never experienced that until I got to Scarsdale. And that was the first time. Now, to this day, anybody says Scarsdale, and I'm like, ugh. But like, it is a weird experience. And I can only imagine going from that to Atlanta, you said?
So I've spent a lot of time in Atlanta and reporting in Atlanta, but now I'm based in Brooklyn, and I went to college in Cambridge. I didn't even go that far away from home. I was at Harvard, but I had so many girlfriends who lived in places like Atlanta or Baltimore who had grown up so much more affirmed by the people around them.
Yeah.
And so, it was my first time like finding those friendships and loving all those elements about myself.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I was putting them through an education, because I remember being in a class and hearing a girl stand up and start to talk about affirmative action, a white girl in my class at Harvard, who started to say, every time I look at Black people, I second guess their abilities because of affirmative action. And I'm just not sure, how can we be sure that any of them like did as well in school, or basically trying to argue that it would be better for Black people if we got rid of affirmative action. But she was also revealing basically that she looked down upon all of us.
Thank you for your
Right.
honesty. What?
And so I sat there. I didn't even blink. I was like, I've heard it all before.
Yeah.
I am so not surprised. But some of my friends, they were crying. They were in shock. They wanted to like start a movement, get this girl kicked out of school. And I was like, oh, no, honey.
No. You're like, that's just Ashley.
There's like 2 out of 5 people at least feel this way, maybe more. And you have to figure out like how to get through, how to dialogue with them if you want to dialogue with them, or stay away from them if you want to stay away from them.
Yes.
But you're not going to get them kicked out of school, that's for sure. So do not even waste your time, because half the administrators probably believe them and agree with them.
Yeah.
So.
No, the professor is probably like, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Same.
Yeah.
Ditto, twins. That's crazy. Wow.
Yeah.
So, I mean, obviously you've had this great, amazing career, but I want to know what inspired you to write this book about this place that literally, I think maybe is like 30 minutes from me, like from where I grew up. And I had no idea. So please tell us all about the book. I want to, from start to finish, I need the people to understand what we're dealing with here, because I was in shock. I was gobsmacked.
So when I think about this book, Madness, I think there's really 2 origin stories. Like, one origin story is I'm a freshman in college. I stumble into a class called Madness in Medicine, and I start learning all about the history of psychiatry. I become obsessed with it, and then I come across this hospital, and the rest is history. Like, I just have to know everything about it. But I think the real origin story actually goes back to my childhood. I told you I'm one of 7 kids, like big Black family. We're so tight. To this day, talking to my siblings almost all day long on a text thread, always calling my parents. But the one topic, the one thing that seemed to be off limits that we really, really struggled to cover was anything having to do with mental health, anything having to do with really difficult emotions, anxiety, depression. And I didn't understand it as a kid. I now have so much more understanding and grace. But at the time, I was kind of angry with my parents and my grandparents, because they had kind of done the pray about it on Sunday thing.
Always pray about it.
Exactly.
Black
Or
household.
go up to your room and deal with it, and then come back down when you're ready and you're over it. And then, if you observed things, or you noticed that some people in our family, our wider family, were struggling, or, I heard rumors of people having been sent to facilities, or I found out very young at just 11 years old that one of my dad's first cousins, a cousin that he loved and he really looked up to, was killed by a police officer in the middle of a mental health crisis. And that it had traumatized my father. It had changed my whole family. But my dad just couldn't talk about it. Like, you couldn't get him to revisit those memories. And so you start to pick up on those things as a kid, like, oh, there's like a secret everyone's keeping from me. And I think that they thought that they were protecting us. But what you actually do when you keep secrets, when you hide the pain you're going through, is that you kind of pass it on. You kind of gift your children anxiety. You gift them worry. They don't totally feel like they know their place in the world. And so I think it really begins then. Like, in a way, my parents' refusal to talk about mental health set me on this journey where I was just obsessed with it.
Mm.
I wanted a therapist. I wanted to talk about my feelings. And then when I was in school and they were farther away and I could just do what I wanted to do, I chose to study it.
Mm.
And when you learn about the history of therapy and treatment, you pretty much only learn about white patients
Right.
and white doctors. And so I went looking and I found this place, Crownsville. And I found out that it wasn't even the only place of this kind. There were a whole number of these segregated, Black only hospitals all over the country. But Maryland's was so fascinating and like bizarre, but also so symbolic to me
Mm.
because it was founded in 1911 and the state of Maryland forced Black people to build themselves an asylum.
Which is wild.
Yeah.
Wild. Because, I mean, when I think about asylums just over the course of history, obviously mental health facilities, I think, have come a long way since, even the 50s or
Some people debate that too.
right. Some people debate that too. But like even I think about the early 1900s, like first of all, these places, from my understanding, were filthy. People with mental health issues and going through mental health crises were not seen as human beings
Yeah.
worthy of proper treatment, proper bedding, proper clothing, a decent living environment. Like it was just kind of like animals. Like
Yeah.
that's how they treated people with mental health issues, which we still do till this day. It's just a little bit more common to find out that somebody has a therapist or, is on a anxiety medication or what
Yeah.
have you. But I can only imagine that while being Black. And what it is you had to build it yourself if you wanted
Right.
you wanted
The
treatment.
state was willing to build the same hospitals for white patients, multiple of them around the state of Maryland, but they didn't want to pay for treatment for Black people.
Mm,
And I think that's just, it says so much, right, about the relationship Black people have to mental health care and
Yeah.
healthcare more broadly now,
yeah.
right? That in order to get anything, we had to build it first and do free labor.
Mm-hmm.
And this is, just in the years right after slavery. It's like a lot of the patients there had been formerly enslaved or were the kids of formerly enslaved people. So this is really close history at that moment.
Yeah.
And so to be made to do free labor all over again before you're even worthy of meeting a doctor or getting some rest, once I saw this history up close, it made me have so much more love and patience for some of the elders in my family who had said some of this stuff about psychiatry and therapy and had said they didn't trust white doctors
Yeah.
because, my mom was born in Baltimore. Like they knew about this place.
Mm,
That's their history.
yeah.
And so, when you see how they were treated and what they were forced to do, you can't help but just have more grace, I think.
Yeah. And it was 11 initial patients.
12 initial
12.
patients, 12 men marched into the woods on March 13th, 1911. Very cold day, according to the historical record. And they start to clear this forest. They start to build a road. They pour concrete. They harvest willow plants, start harvesting tobacco. And every week, this white doctor named Dr. Robert Winterroad, who ran the asylum, brings in more and more patients. So he's bringing in these patients who are also going to be workers. And it gets to be about 150 of them. And they construct this unbelievable, actually really beautiful brick asylum that still stands more than 100 years later. If you're in
Mm.
Maryland, you can drive down Crownsville Road in Anne Arundel County and still go see it.
Mm.
And I'm always struck when you go by those buildings, there is something spiritual there. You can't help but be awed because I think you can feel this energy, the weight of the history there. But also just when you look at the buildings and you see their bones and you know that people built them
Yeah.
who were allegedly so, unwanted that they couldn't be in society anymore, but clearly so talented, so strong, so, creative that they still could do all of this.
Yeah.
You can feel that
Yeah.
when you go by.
And were they aware of what they were even getting themselves into by going to this place? Were they promised something in return?
Well, they were promised that once the hospital they built was done, they'd be brought inside and become patients who would get treatment. But, in those early years, like you said, there's not that much treatment.
Yeah.
And what ends up happening is that they're put to more and more work. So first they build themselves this place.
Mm-hmm.
And then I look at in the book how the hospital puts them to work running a massive, very plantation-like farm.
I mean, the whole thing sounds plantation-like.
It gets, girl, it
Like,
gets worse from there. So they start renting the patients out to private businesses in a very similar fashion to what we see happening to a lot of Black men in prison labor now.
I
They
just
make
got
them,
chills.
I know, they make them run the laundry, the kitchen, the morgue. I mean, they're having patients serve the employees food, not the other way around in those early years. Yeah.
And was there any treatment actually being given?
Well, yes and no. So, at first treatment is like they had these big wooden chairs they would strap people in and like keep you in the chair for hours or days on end because you
Yeah.
were misbehaving or acting erratically. They had this thing called hydrotherapy, which could be great or bad.
Mm.
So they had these huge like claw tubs. Think about those old school tubs.
Mm-hmm.
And they would put patients in them and then put a tarp over their bodies so that they're like fully submerged. And the only part of them that you can see anymore after they're in the tub is like from the chin up.
Mm.
And there would either be piping hot or ice cold water poured into the bath with them. And patients would be left in those conditions for a couple minutes, for a couple hours to relax. And some patients liked that. They wanted to kind of do an ice bath or, a big warm, bath time almost.
Yeah.
And then sometimes what you found is that there were patients who were left in those tubs for days, literally up to about 3 days at a time, which at that point is more like torture.
Yeah.
And so that's a lot of what you see in those early years. I mean, from 1911 all the way up to like the 50s, 60s, and 70s is that until they really started having medications and more like scientific understanding,
Right.
that they were kind of trying things. It was like the dark ages.
It really, really was. I just think about the fact that, back in the, I mean, what, 50 years ago or whenever. When was the last time somebody could be thrown into an asylum for having period cramps?
Ooh, well, I mean, technically probably about 50 years ago is what you'd want to comfortably say.
Yeah.
But I mean, you can always find interesting cases of like husbands accusing their wives of being crazy and getting them
Right.
committed.
Right.
Yeah.
It happened all the time. It was
Yeah,
just
it
like, oh,
was
he
a
wanted
lot
to have a
more
weekend
common.
alone and,
Yeah.
throw you in there for just about anything. So when you think about like the treatment that was given even for that, I mean, I've seen a ton of documentaries and watched a ton of, movies and pop culture, Girl Interrupted. Like you think about
Yeah.
those times when it really did seem like they were just throwing spaghetti at the wall and like
Yeah.
seeing what stuck when it came to mental health.
Yeah. And they're like trying to be professional, like they're wearing like white coats and all this stuff.
Yeah.
But one of my favorite parts of the book that it has like elements that are sad. It has elements that are, in my opinion, kind of funny. And then also a lot of beauty because for a while, only white people are allowed to work at Crownsville, the hospital at the center of all of this. So they're running the place and it's all Black patients. But then in the like 40s, 50s, and 60s, they start letting some Black people get their foot in the door. And, these Black communities, many of them are Black women, they get in there and they're ready to like start getting their first jobs as nurses and to take care of their families and everything. And then they observe their white colleagues and they're like, oh my God, half of these people are addicted to meth. Literally, like some of them can't read. Some of them barely went to school. And we were told we couldn't work here because
We
everyone
weren't
thought
qualified.
we weren't qualified.
Yeah.
We were ignorant.
Yeah.
But now my supervisor can't read. And so I have to do
Oh my
my
God.
work and my supervisor's work. No, literally, there's like parts of the book where some of the women that I've gotten to know who are Black women in their 90s, still living in Maryland to this day,
Wow.
who were sharing with me these crazy memories of like, no, you don't understand how crazy it was when we got to work. Like, we thought the patients were the people with the issues,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And they're like, no, it was like our
Oh.
supervisors and our colleagues.
My God.
Because that was the era.
Yeah.
People like doing cocaine like it's nothing. Like
Yeah.
coming to work on meth. And these women felt like they couldn't make any mistakes.
Yeah.
Because, they're going to be judged doubly as hard.
I mean, I would
So,
argue it's still very much like that in every
right.
aspect of
Yeah. And so that part of the
career.
story was like, they would tell me stories that had me crying because of some of the things they saw. And then I would be cackling at some of the stuff. Like one of their supervisors, who was always high, like drove a sports car and crashed on the campus. Like, just what? And that's one of the reasons why I titled the book Madness.
Yeah.
Not because the patients were mad, but because of the institution,
Yeah.
the culture, the way in which like America has kind of gaslit Black people.
Right.
and sent us all these messages that are actually like a projection about itself, right?
Mm.
Like we're not deserving, we're not enough, but
Mhm.
actually the truth is like we've been here all along and none of it would be possible without us.
Yes, and we built it.
Yeah. And
Wow.
so I feel like this book it's a story about Maryland. It's a story about a Black community. It's a story about an asylum. But I actually really think it's like a profile of the psyche of this country
Mm. Mhm.
because, I mean, just when you see the way that they treat both the Black patients and then the Black employees, and the hospital opens in 1911, but closes in 2004 within our lifetimes,
Wow.
right? So you really can see like an entire century of American history and it just, I promise you, when you get to the end of this book, like so many things click for you about why certain things in our medical system work this way, why certain communities consistently have so little trust,
Mm.
consistently don't want to go to therapy, report having hard times when they go to emergency rooms. During the pandemic, we're slower to connect with doctors or be open to getting vaccinated
Yeah.
or even just calling someone when they start to feel sick, right?
Yeah.
And it all just clicked for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, even I think about Black women and birth and just like that
Yeah.
entire there's always a root to the distress. There's always something there that people whether they wanna pay attention to it or not, like, the facts.
Yeah.
The stories are there. What was the most interesting or, like, the story that stuck with you the most that you heard?
Oh my gosh.
Were
So
you were able to interview patients as
I
well?
spoke to patients, to
Wow.
employees, to administrators, neighbors. Okay, so there is a story in the book, a couple different chapters touch on it about a former patient named Sonia King, and she is now a pastor, still living and working in Maryland. She
Wow.
came to Crownsville in the 70s after experiencing a number of traumatic incidents in her life and feeling like she just wasn't worthy, feeling like really rejected and low. I think as many people go through periods of their life
Yeah.
where they feel that way. And so she's sent to Crownsville after having basically a mental breakdown and she arrives there, but this is right in the period where all the Black community is starting to get jobs there. And so instead of showing up to this hospital where it's all white employees, it's actually mostly Black employees.
Mm.
And it turns out one of her best childhood friends is a nurse there.
Wow.
Yeah. And her name is Faye Belt. And Faye Belt finds out her friend is one of the patients, and she's not even assigned to work with her. She actually works on the whole opposite side of the campus, which is huge. It's
Mm.
1,500 acres. So
Mm.
she goes and she adds onto her own shifts every single day. And for no money, goes to the other end of the campus every afternoon around 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, takes her friend Sonia on walks, gives her hugs. They sit together, they cry together, they go relax out in the sun together, and they just kind of hold on to each other.
Wow.
Both of them are survivors of sexual abuse, and they
Mm.
just are able to support each other and talk through a lot. And, they still like to see these women who are now in their 70s, like to be such good friends still later, still so connected. And to see this woman who made a full recovery, she says, not because there was a silver bullet, a medication, a technology that came in and made everything right, but because her community, like it wrapped its arms around her.
Yeah.
And just the beauty of like the way that Black people kind of are their own heroes.
Mhm.
They come into these spaces where they were rejected and disrespected, but they don't give up and they still just show up for each other every day. That filled me up. That story, just like I think about the two of them. I talk to the two of them all the time still.
Oh.
They really changed my life. And the interesting thing was, this is kind of personal. While I was reporting on all of this the last few years, one of my own immediate family members started to experience a psychotic break.
Mm.
And like during the pandemic, they were panicking and having like nightmares and hallucinations. And they were really worried after January 6th about like racial violence and what was going to
Mhm.
happen to them and all of that.
Mhm.
And my family was so lost. We were so worried about them. Like, I would fly home every weekend from work and try to like support this person, take them outside, like tell them that they were safe. We were going to make sure we had their back. But, when you're in that state, if you've ever had a loved one who struggled so deeply,
Yeah.
like it's really hard to get through to people just by telling them it's fine. Hey,
Yeah.
stop worrying. Like,
Right.
go get a good night's sleep and it'll all be better tomorrow.
Right.
It doesn't work. And so when I got to know these women and report on their story as a journalist, they actually taught me so much. And then my family kind of copied and borrowed their strategy. Like,
Mm.
so in addition to trying to get them to meet with doctors, most of what we did that ended up really saving my loved one and getting them stable and back on a good path was that we just like refused to let them be alone. We did so many activities with them. It was pandemic days, so a lot of that was just like walking outside or like
Yeah.
sitting on a bench or like just eating some good food.
Yeah.
And we just kept telling them like, you're not alone. This isn't the end. This isn't like who you are.
Yeah.
This is just a moment in time. And we helped them really lift the shame and all the embarrassment and the hurt that comes through having an experience like that.
Mm-hmm.
And what I realized from these two women in the book was that's so much of what's missing from our healthcare system now. There's no
Yes.
community. There's
Yes.
no like love. I mean, we can barely find doctors who look like us. Like,
Yes.
if I get pregnant in a year, like it'll be hell trying to find a Black woman doctor who's going to
Yeah.
have my back. I'm going to try, but I know it'll be hard, right?
Yeah.
And that's so much of what's missing. And so it's this weird moment in time where this hospital that has this horrible history that has treated Black people so badly actually for once starts to look like a real community hospital because
Mm.
there's Black women treating their own friends and neighbors in this place. And that really, it just, I think I will forever be thinking about them. When I get emails right now from readers who tell me about their experiences, they always shout out those two women
Oh
as
my
like,
God.
oh my God, like I love them. Like I want to see them. I hope someone makes like a movie about the two of them
Yeah.
because
Oh, that would be
yeah,
beautiful.
I mean, it's just one of those stories where like there's so much joy and such a reminder of like the ingenuity and creativity and like relentlessness of Black people
Yeah.
in the
Yes.
face of all the things. Like
Yes.
just that ability to keep showing up for each other
Yeah.
is like it's make or break. It's life or death. Like
Yeah.
having people who have your back and love you even in your lowest moments, that's everything.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I was thinking when you were talking about Sonia, and thank you for sharing the personal story about your own family. But I was thinking about how I don't know what the medical advisors were like at that time for her, but I'm sure that that experience with her friend was probably even more healing than any kind of,
Yeah.
treatment, quote
Oh
unquote, that
yeah,
they
she
could have
doesn't
been.
remember the medication that they
Yeah.
had her take, right? She doesn't
Wow.
remember like the meetings that she went to.
Yeah.
She remembers Faye, her friend, coming and taking her on walks. She remembers another woman named Geraldine who used to come to her like every night before bed and be like,
Mm.
this is not the end of your story.
Yeah.
You're getting out of here. Like she remembers the
Wow.
love and the messages people gave her. The rest of it kind of fades away.
Yeah. Oh my God, I love that. And then by the time they closed, did anybody get any kind of compensation for the work or reparations? Like,
You know, it's going to be very interesting now that this history is out there and there's a whole movement in the community now to turn this historic land into a place of healing, whether that's going to
mhm.
be a museum. There's all kinds of ideas floating around right now, like a therapy horse farm or
Oh,
to
wow.
create like housing for veterans or homeless people. Like there's so many
Yeah.
proposals. And they're going to former patients and families to ask them, like, what do you want?
Wow.
But I think it's going to be interesting to see if reparations or some kind of lawsuit, what may come, because there are families that are still hurting because of what happened there.
Yeah.
I
Yes.
mean, and again, like we as a country, especially right now, there's a whole movement effort to be like that was so long ago that has nothing to do with
I love when
today.
people say that, but you can name how many people that
Right,
you spoke to that lived this experience,
right,
even from the very beginning, that are
exactly,
still very much here.
and there are many people who like it was just their grandparents who were there in
Yeah.
the beginning. So maybe that generation has passed, but their descendants are very much alive. They have photographs and records and memories and they know what happened.
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting to watch, I think, because with Governor Westmore, the first Black governor there now
Mhm.
in Maryland, and other people like the county executive in this area called Stuart Pittman, who kind of works with more on a lot of different projects. Like, what are they going to do? Like, will they really follow through on their promises? Is this community going to get to have a voice in what it all becomes?
Yeah.
But it could, on the good side of all that, is like it could be like a model for something in the future.
Yeah.
You know, I can't think of a massive, 100-something acre property in any big community or city right now that is all about healing and all about mental health. It doesn't
Yeah.
really exist.
No. Not
So
that I could think of.
I know we all need it. I
Yeah,
mean,
for sure. For
man,
sure. Wow, that's incredible. I mean, did it give you hope writing this book? Like, did you feel
it did.
hopeful about the future?
I actually did. I don't know if it's really like hopeful about the future, but I guess it showed me a possible roadmap for the future, right?
Mm,
I think a lot of people want us to believe that we should throw our hands up and just accept that, oh, like there's always going to be, lots of homeless people and there's always going to be people who are struggling with their mental health. There's always going to be mass shooters and there's nothing we can do about it.
mm,
There are a lot of people who are invested in us giving up on that.
mhm,
But the lesson that I've learned from the people, the men and women who worked at this hospital, the families that gave their entire lives to helping save just one person, just the people they could reach every single day, is that if we actually funded community programs, if we changed our healthcare system so that it really was much more focused on ties to your community, people that you know, people who reflect you, people who grew up and know you, people who look like you,
mhm.
would have a real impact.
Yeah,
And
educated police officers on how to handle people who are going through mental health
right,
crises.
or people who aren't police officers
Right.
having good funding and being able to show up and help out. And there are these different communities that are implementing these things already. But I really think that there's a question now of, should there be a national movement? Should there be a real, back in the 60s, like JFK's whole thing was mental health.
Mm,
And the country recognized that was something that everybody would benefit for. That's part of why all the hospitals have shut down, because there was this movement and this idea that, like, let's get out of the dark ages.
yeah,
Have we given up?
yeah,
Maybe someone should pick that project back up.
yeah.
And the other thing is, like, when you talk to people, and I travel a lot for NBC and I get to cover stories about race and justice and politics and sit down with people of literally every walk of life, everyone has a touch point for the mental health crisis right now.
Mm,
Republican, Democrat, black, white, rich, poor.
mhm.
I mean, the mental health care system is even failing rich people.
Yeah.
I have spoken to rich people who are like, I'm on a wait list for this rehabilitation thing. I can't get my son into this program. Or, man, like,
Mm,
literally a month stay at this place is $100,000. Like,
yes, yes.
that's, if you're failing even the wealthiest and they're saying something's not working for them, well, I mean, just imagine what everyone else is going through.
Right.
And what that tells me is you could build a coalition of people. You could really start having these, like, cross-cultural and, like, communal dialogues about solutions, because grief and loss come for everyone.
Yes,
Sadness comes for everyone.
yes.
That means we have a lot more people who could be our allies, our support, who we could work with on these things
Yeah,
than maybe we think.
yeah. I feel like during COVID, there were a lot of conversations surrounding mental health, and like there was like this resurgence of what you were just talking about, of like focusing in
Yeah.
on mental health and going to therapy and taking time for yourself and, not overworking yourself and all these things. And then we came out of it and it was like work from home, still
Yeah.
prioritize yourself, tell your boss when you feel like you're burnt out or X, Y, and Z. And now it's like they've completely done away with that. It's like you need to be maximizing your fucking
Yeah.
working potential and you need to be nobody's working hard enough and everybody's
Yeah.
now working past the time that they're actually required to work and on the weekends, and there's no middle ground.
I know. Yeah. But I will say, when I have individual conversations with people, I think there has been a change internally. I don't know that the companies and
Yeah.
the systems have recognized that. But
Yeah.
I do think, people are setting more boundaries for themselves, especially the younger generation. They're like,
Mhm.
oh, no, you're not going to treat me like that because I'm not being paid enough
Right.
to
Right.
be
The
like
younger generation is
bulldozed.
speaking up. The
Yeah.
Gen Zers are not playing around with that shit. They're like, I clock out at 5 p.m. That is my time. I'm here from 9
And
to
you know
5.
what? And I know people have all kinds of things to say about them, but the truth is, like, I think that there's a lot of power in just speaking up for yourself and talking about what you're going through, what your needs are. And one of the things that I have really, like, also taken from this work is that at a time of so much, like, conflict and confusion all over the world
Mhm.
and so many people hurting, the best act of love that you can do is actually taking care of your mental health.
Mm.
It is prioritizing yourself. It is getting a therapist if you need it. It is showing up for someone in your family or a friend who is struggling and maybe needs a little extra backing. Those small acts, they may sound small or sort of trivial or not like they're the key, most important part of our day. But if you don't do that, if you don't take care of yourself, if you don't really love on yourself first, you can literally psychologically and genetically pass trauma and pain and confusion down the line of your family tree.
Yeah.
And taking care of yourself and prioritizing your health keeps you in the game for longer. It gives you so much longevity. It gives you so much clarity. You're going to have a better career. You're going to have better relationships. You're going to have a richer life if you invest upfront in who you are and what you need and what will make you feel whole. And if you push those things off or act like not talking about them makes them go away, you're in for a very rude awakening.
Yeah.
And so I wrote this book really because as much as it's a story about a hospital and there's the difficult stuff, it actually to me is like it's a story about a community loving on itself, saving itself, and showing that you can make it through a lot of these very difficult times if you put that kind of love and you recognize the humanity in other people and in yourself, even in your worst moments.
Yeah.
If you put that first, you can get through so much.
You need to make like, they have the Calm app. You need to make like therapy affirmations for
What's
people
so funny is
to
I'm
listen
so
to.
bad. I am so bad at meditating.
Oh, I can't
So the
meditate, but I
idea of
would
me
listen
being
to
hired by
you.
Calm would be like my boyfriend would be like, no, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. She does not deserve this job.
She is an imposter. No, I would listen to it because your voice is just so soothing and you make me feel very good.
I
feel
love what I
very,
do. I love
very
my
happy.
work. And so I
Yeah.
try to infuse that because
Yeah.
I know that so many people feel lost in what they do or not as connected to their work or their purpose.
Yeah.
And so I try to show my love for it and remember my love for it on the hard days at work as well. But yeah, I mean, you don't want me to lead a yoga class. I don't know that
I
should
do.
be,
I think I do.
doing anything mindful
I think I
because
do.
like
Because we need it. Well, we asked our listeners, Black and Indigenous people of color, was mental health ever discussed in your home? Can you guess what the percentage was?
I'm gonna guess 15% said yes.
16% said yes.
Oh wow. Okay.
You were spot on. 84% said no.
Yeah.
And I think about this because same in my household. It wasn't like you prayed it away.
Yeah.
If you were feeling sad, you went to your room, scream in a pillow, go for a walk, go play with your friends, go and it's not, I don't even know if we can necessarily fault our parents' generation for that because how would they know? How would they know if their parents were building the hospitals that they were supposed to be getting care from to freaking crazy people who are actually running it? The crazy people were the people running it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
No, I mean, I'm so not surprised by that
Yeah.
statistic. And I think it's part of why this generation is like, we are going to talk about our feelings.
Yes.
We're going to put it all out on the table.
Yes.
Even if my employer doesn't want to hear it.
Yeah.
Because it's like that reaction to, it's that effort to correct. And even if we don't know how to have the conversations right all the time, we don't always use the right words, we don't always know our history, people are just trying to change.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really beautiful thing.
Start.
Yeah, I mean, I know I want to have kids someday. I don't have any yet, but I know I want my kids to look to me as someone who, if they had something horrible happen to them that I didn't know about, or if they were feeling depressed, like I want them to know that I would have their back, that I would do everything for them.
Yeah.
And I got the chance to interview some Black psychiatrists and nurses who are still working to this day, and just get their take on sort of what's going on in the mental health crisis. What do kids need right now? And there's a couple very easy things that they point to. Like one is that a lot of kids basically tell their psychiatrists or therapists that all they have is school, their home or apartment, and their phone. That they're very lonely.
Yeah. There's no third place.
There's no third place.
Yeah.
And so, find a place that's welcoming to your family, to your kids, to your friends. Like we all really need that right now.
Yeah.
And then a lot of kids report that they don't believe that there's any adult in the world who they can fully trust, who they can tell anything to. And so, it's part of why sometimes you don't find out about somebody struggling until they're in that like emergency moment.
Yeah.
And what she was telling me is like all of us could start tomorrow. We could wake up tomorrow and just try to be that person for our niece. We're our best friend's kid. You know what I mean? Just be that person who, if, okay, you don't trust your mom, like you could tell me and I'm not going to judge you.
Yeah.
Like I'm going to help you out.
Yeah.
Like how can we all show up for each other a little bit better?
Right. It's the little things. I mean, my cousin has 2 boys, and recently she was telling me that she got her 5-year-old a book of feelings. And I was like, they have that? Like they have that now? And so like if he's having a feeling, he can open the book and be like, I'm feeling this. And they talk about it. I'm like, wow, we've come a long way.
Yeah.
We've come a long way. There's still plenty of ways to go, but I do feel like even our generation, we're teaching our parents' generation too. Like sometimes I'll talk to my mom and, she'll explain something. I'll be like, no, your feelings are valid. This is exactly what you're feeling judged or you're feeling whatever. And like point it, like actually put words to it. And she's like, yeah, that is what I'm feeling.
I know. Oh my God. Sometimes I really feel for my mom because she raised 7 kids. She works so hard. And sometimes she's not the most in touch with her emotions, to put it diplomatically.
She's busy.
She's so
not
busy.
thinking about it. Yeah.
And so, sometimes when I like catch up with her or I take her out to dinner or whatever, I'm always trying to just like see like, how are you doing?
Yes.
Like what's going on? How are you feeling? Like, let's not just talk about everything that's going on for me because I'm your kid. Like I'm trying to figure out how am I my mom's friend now? Because I'm realizing like, I don't know, when you're a mom, like you give until you have like nothing left to give.
Yes.
And you don't always have people, even a lot of women don't even have a good spouse who's saying like, what can I do for you?
Right.
So I'm like, okay, I need to figure out how to be my mom's friend.
Yeah. No, I'm definitely that. We're definitely there. I think when you get to be like an adult, you're like, my mom's she's just a girl. She's just a girl trying to figure it
imperfect
out.
person.
Yes.
Who's like done a lot of badass stuff and worked very hard for me.
Yeah.
And now the least I can do is like, I don't know, show up for her too.
Yeah. Ask her. Because moms will always be like, oh, I'm good. Everything's great. I'm blessed.
Yeah.
I'm blessed. Okay. Tell me the real
I have to
shit.
ask my mom like 5 follow-up questions to get to the truth.
Exactly.
If I'm just like, how are you doing, mom? She'll be like, good.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay. And then by question 5, she's like, well, actually.
Yeah.
Right.
This happened and then this happened and this. I'm at the point now where my mom will be like, well, Starbucks didn't have the blah, 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 blah today. And then I went to Chopped and they didn't have raisins to put. And then I'm like, I kind of just take the phone away from my ear for a while, do something else and then come back to it.
Yeah.
Just kidding, Mom. If you're listening to this, I listen to every last
everything you say. We
love you so much. Antonia, tell everyone where they can find you and where they can find the book.
So you can find me on all socials, Antonia Hylton. My handle on everything is ahylton26, so I'm not hard to find. And then you can buy Madness everywhere that books are sold. I always try to encourage people to support like your local bookshop, go in, like, Jeff Bezos doesn't need more money.
Yeah.
But if you don't have a local bookstore, because there are communities that don't have local bookstores, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, all those websites, they got you.
I'm so excited. This is incredible, fascinating, heartbreaking, heartwarming. Like it's all the feelings.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming. Thank you so much.